So there's a story that the human body regenerates all of our cells every 7 years. And that's a pretty cool notion, to think that there's a brand new you in 7 years. And to have that completely new you is simply a matter of being around for another 7 years. It turns out, however, there's a little more to the story than that. The talk today is reinventing you. And the idea is that we are always free to transform, to create, to invite something new into the experience that we're having in life. And the question is, once all of our cells renew, once that brand new you is here, what are we going to do? What are you going to do with that? Are you going to do the same things that you've been doing? Are you going to continue on with the same things that's been brought you up to now? Or are you going to do something new with that newness? Because it turns out that all of the experiences that you've had up until now, everything that has happened in your life up until now, has created the you that you are today. And as we talk about from time to time in this teaching, getting back to basics, there's only one. There's one mind, one power, one presence, one source, one creator. We call it God, Spirit, Nature, the Big Bang. Whatever it is that we call it, it is that one which since the beginning of time has been sharing itself as and through and in all of its creation. There is only that one. And that means that each of us is a different aspect or expression or experience of that one. That one power and presence is revealing itself right here and now as me and as each of us. So whatever it is that we are, it is that divine presence taking specific and particular form. And it is always possible for that divine presence to take form in a either slightly or dramatically different way, starting now. Transformation, change, growth, enhancement, uplift, something new is always possible. It's possible right now. It's possible in every moment. And oh, by the way, it's been possible every moment up until now as well, whether we have taken advantage of that or not. About 4 years ago, for the first time in my adult life, my weight was below 200 pounds. I'd been heavy as a teenager and started off adulthood heavy and got down close to 200 pounds on several occasions and made the last grand push leading up to my 60th birthday. And it was actually it was the end of May of 2019 that I broke into the single. And my weight started with a 1 for the first time. And that's something that I thought about from time to time over the course of the previous 60 years, or anyway, 40. And it hadn't happened. Was it not possible? No, of course it was possible. It could have happened any time along the way, and it didn't, because the way that I was engaging with the world, with my life, didn't leave the possibility for that. So I could go back and I could blame myself and I could beat myself up and I can wonder about, what if and why not and all the rest of that. And sometimes that's a wonderful activity, especially when we're feeling down, to be able to beat ourselves up for stuff that happened decades ago. And it doesn't necessarily help. So what we want to do is something that is going to help. We want to be able to open ourselves up to get into the alignment and the balance with the creative power that's creating everything, and allow it and invite it and inspire it and empower it to create something new for us. So I mentioned that the cells in our bodies regenerate every 7 years. There's an asterisk there, on average. So the average is every 7 years. And in fact, the detail is the average age of all the cells in the human body is 7 to 10 years. But that doesn't mean that they all replace themselves every 7 to 10 years. There are 330 billion cells that get replaced every day, which is equivalent to about 1% of all of our cells, which means that in 80 to 100 days, 30 trillion will have been replenished, and that's the equivalent of a new you, on average. It turns out that on average is important. Statistics. Statistics. It reminds me of the story of the statistician who drowned in a lake that was only 3 inches deep on average. So, the statistics matter. And it turns out that there are different times for different cells. And I'll give you some of the details there, and you'll understand why it's important. The cells in our body that get replaced the most quickly are the ones in our colon. It's a pretty hostile environment, every 3 to 5 days. Beyond that, the rest of our stomach and intestines, the cells that line the surface of the stomach, there have a difficult and short life. It's a pretty challenging environment, about every 5 days that they get replaced. And if you're going to have any of the cells get replaced, it's the ones that are under attack by stomach acid. So, that's really helpful to keep that comfortable barrier in place. Next one after that is the skin. The epidermis sees a fair amount of wear and tear. It's the outermost layer. It's where we touch the world around us. And those rejuvenate or get replaced every 2 to 4 weeks. Red blood cells, about 120 days. They do a lot of work, taking the oxygen, carrying it around our bodies, dropping it off, bringing this unused stuff back. The liver is also quite high up on the list. Every 150 to 500 days, those cells rejuvenate. That's the detoxifier. That's where all the junk goes to get carried away. Something I know very little about: hair, natural fuzz. 6 years for women, 3 years for men. No time at all for me and for Breen. So there you go. The cells in our bones, the skeletal system, regenerate constantly, but it takes about 10 years for the process to be complete. Oh, and the process slows down as we age and our bones get thinner. Muscle and fat cells can take up to 70 years to renew. I hear that and I say, well, does that explain why it took 60 years for me to get to the weight that I was looking for? And the answer is no. Those things are not actually connected. And then there's the other part, the outlier, that some of these cells in our bodies are with us our entire lives. They don't regenerate. And when I mention what they are, you're going to go, oh, that's pretty important. The brain, the spinal cord, the heart, and the eyes. Those are with us throughout. So take care of them. And it also explains, a lot of where we are in the experience that we're having in life. If we've done something that's damaged or harmed or undermined parts of our body, then we get to live with that. It is not necessarily going to be a limitation for our entire lives, but we're not going to change what happened in the past by wishing it away, by pretending that it didn't happen, or by just sweeping it under the rug. We get to be accountable for the experiences and the activities that we've had up until now. And we're always free to invite something new. Because change happens. Change is always ready to happen. And the change is not just a change in our activities, although that can be tremendously helpful. The change is, first of all, a change in consciousness. And when we have a shift in consciousness, it's nice to say, I just had a new idea and now my life is completely different. But it turns out that there's a little bit of detail in there, because sometimes when we put a new idea into our old consciousness, it doesn't fit necessarily that comfortably. So I have a demonstration that I'm going to do, and this is a video that I took, and you'll see why I'm not doing it live as I play the video. In her classic book in 1903, Emily Cady, in Lessons in Truth, talked about a concept that she called chemicalization. And it's a very powerful way of explaining how it is that when we are going through this process of creating a new life by using our consciousness and having a new thought, that sometimes it brings an abrupt experience. I actually got taken out of the book in the late 1940s and was left out until the 100th anniversary edition in 2003 because they thought it may be a little bit negative and kind of harsh. And the fact of the matter is, if there's something negative and harsh that's going on, we probably ought to know about it. So what she was talking about in chemicalization is the fact that when we take our existing consciousness and we put new thoughts into it, they don't just go and mix in happily. Sometimes there is a chemical reaction. And as an example, we have some common household substances here. This represents consciousness. It's a glass of clear liquid, but if I measure the pH balance of this, you'll see that the test strip turns red because it's actually very acidic. In fact, that's vinegar. This represents a new idea, a new thought that we can bring into our consciousness. This is something that we want to be having. This is something we want to experience. But it's different than what we've been thinking. It's different than what's already in our consciousness. And of course, what's going to happen when we take a new thought and we put it into our existing consciousness, it's going to react, and we're going to wind up with the situation. Now, there are people who would call this bad, that would call it a problem. Now, I could have done this same demonstration by using Mentos and a Diet Coke, and it could have been an absolutely explosive situation. But you see, what happens is eventually things calm down a little bit, and if you take another new thought and you add it in there, you won't get nearly as much of a reaction. You'll get some, but not as much. And as you continue putting new thoughts into this consciousness, what happens is the consciousness changes. As a way of demonstrating that, I'll show you what happens when I put the test strip in here. You see that it doesn't change color at all. That's because the consciousness itself has changed. And that's the idea of chemicalization. I sometimes refer to that as the second act. When we get into a situation, in the first act in a movie, we're going to meet the characters who we come to love and we're going to be rooting for. In the second act, the malevolent force is the bad guy. It looks like he's going to be taking over. And in the middle of the second act, it's really hard to see that things are going to come out okay. But the second act is what makes it possible to have the third act, the finale, as all the pieces come back together. The good guys win. The couple goes and lives happily ever after. And that is all made possible by this chemicalization, by this change. So when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable. But it is love unfolding. And that's the important thing to remember. How does that work for you? What does that mean for you? Are there any other ways of understanding or explaining that? Well, consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They neither have storehouse nor barn, and God feeds them. How much more are you better than the fowls? And that's from Luke chapter 12. And which of you, by taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? We're not getting taller because we dream to be taller. If you cannot do the thing which is least, why do you take thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not, and yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. There is an infinite creative power that creates everything. And when we stop trying to control the way things are going, when we stop trying to decide what our cells ought to do and how everything else goes together, and get ourselves into alignment so that our consciousness and the new experience that we're desiring are in alignment. When we're ready to deal with the overflow and the shock, the overwhelm, the bubbling up that happens when we try and get that new idea to work, and our ego or our consciousness pushes against it, because we've never done that before. We've never had that before. That's not been the truth of us before. There might be some resistance. And we think that we have to struggle, we have to work, or that the good is not available to us. As the scripture says, though, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. It is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. It's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. All this good is available to each of us and to all of us right now and all the time. Does that mean you get to wish for something and say, oh, I want it, and suddenly snap, it happens? No, I didn't say that. What I said was that the good that we are seeking is available to us, and as we clear out the underbrush, the things that have been holding us back in the past, and as we step forward with a clear space into that newness, when we're ready to deal with what's been in our consciousness and our belief system before, and dispense with it and change it into something new, then we are opening up to the goodness and the glory and the wonder. And we don't have to do anything to earn it, to deserve it. There are no God points or brownie points that we have to rack up in order to be able to claim it. It is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And you need to make room for it. You need to make room in your consciousness and in your life for that good to show up. And then there's nothing that can stop it. So invite and allow and be that bright light of love that you are, that goodness that you are. Get ready to tell that dazzling story about the fabulous transformation that's happening and happened for you. Because it's never more than a moment away. Even if that moment takes 60 years. You deserve all the good. And so it is.